The first warning came as silence. At 02:14 GMT, satellites above the Pacific blinked off the grid, one after another, like stars snuffed from the sky. No warning shots, no demands, no buildup, just darkness, a hush before the storm. By 02:17, amateur astronomers across the globe flooded forums and radio channels with frantic reports. They saw it first, shadows blotting out the constellations, black wedges sliding across the heavens. The Orion belt disappeared. Cassiopeia vanished. Then all at once the shadows lit with fire. They weren't shadows at all. They were ships. Colossal vessels, each longer than a city, descended through the atmosphere in formation. Their hulls glowed a molten red from the burn of entry, screaming across the night sky like falling gods. Thunder shook windows from Tokyo to New York. Children were ripped from sleep by the tremor in the walls, and across the planet, millions rushed outside just in time to see the stars burn. Over Manhattan, a warship cast its shadow wide enough to blot out all of Central Park. In Moscow, one ship's descent cracked the air itself, a sonic boom shattering glass for miles. In Nairobi, a family clutched one another as an entire neighborhood drowned in the silhouette of something alien, mechanical and merciless. And then, silence again. For a breathless moment, humanity stared upward, paralyzed. The ships didn't fire. They just hung there, eclipsing the sun, massive and unmoving. Then came the voice. It was not one voice, but many, male and female, deep and shrill. It came in every language at once, woven together like some cruel choir. The words were simple. Submit, and you will be spared. Screens flickered. Radios crackled. The alien message rolled across the airwaves with cold precision. No threats, no bluster, just inevitability. And across Earth, despair fell heavier than the ships themselves. Governments scrambled, issuing declarations of emergency. Fighter jets scrambled from bases only to falter as alien interference crippled their instruments. Entire battalions mobilized, but soldiers knew in their bones what they were facing. Foes centuries, maybe millennia ahead. In Paris, church bells rang not in warning, but in mourning. In Cairo, markets emptied, streets silent under the looming shadow. In São Paulo, a mother pulled her children beneath the table as dust fell from the ceiling. Humanity had always looked to the stars with wonder. Now they looked up with dread. Yet while the world trembled, while fear spread like fire, there were places where silence did not mean surrender. Far below Colorado, inside a bunker carved deeper than any mountain's roots, generals and leaders gathered. The air was heavy with tension but not panic. No one spoke of begging. No one spoke of yielding. Instead, a lone general leaned across the table, his voice calm against the echo of distant alarms. "They're here," he said. Across from him, an admiral simply nodded. The room fell quiet again, not from fear, but from something else. Anticipation. The invaders thought they had come unchallenged, but they had already made their first mistake. Visual shift. Above the skies. The alien warships spread across the globe like vultures circling carrion. They hung motionless, oppressive, waiting for humanity to bend its knee. Smaller craft detached like hornets peeling from the hive, descending toward major cities. Their engines roared, setting entire skylines trembling. But the humans did not kneel. In the bunkers, in the command rooms, even in shattered streets where soldiers clutched rifles that looked like toys beside alien machines, there was something the invaders couldn't read, couldn't measure, a calmness, a patience, a whisper moving silently among Earth's defenders. Wait. Just wait. Above London, the lead ship tilted, massive cannons glowing with energy. Citizens screamed as light gathered into a beam bright enough to erase the city in a single stroke. The sky burned white, but the blast never came. The ship hesitated as if awaiting permission. A calculated cruelty. The aliens wanted humanity to watch, to taste fear before the end. And in that hesitation, in that cruel pause, something shifted on Earth, not in the skies, but in the hearts of those watching. For the first time in millennia, humanity faced extinction not from itself but from beyond. Yet instead of breaking, something hardened. In the bunker, the general whispered a single phrase to his staff, his eyes on the live feed of burning skies. "They don't know yet." The staff officer beside him frowned. "Know what, sir?" The general leaned back, eyes sharp, voice steady. "That Earth has been waiting for this." The attack began at dawn. In Beijing, the sky cracked open with light. Alien craft descended like blades, cutting through the clouds, engines screaming as plasma cannons ignited. The first strike vaporized an entire district. Buildings, cars, families reduced to ash in less than a second. By noon, Paris burned. The Eiffel Tower fell beneath the weight of a troop carrier, its molten wreckage bending and snapping like kindling. Troops poured out. Tall, armored figures with eyes glowing blue behind masks. They moved in silence, their weapons pulsing with plasma bolts that turned tanks into molten rivers. In New York, the Hudson boiled. Alien warships hovered low, dragging the waters into whirlpools with their gravitational engines. Fighter jets screamed upward to meet them, but alien beams cut through the sky, slicing wings from steel. Pilots ejected, only to be caught in midair by drones that shredded them before they touched the ground. The world fell apart in hours. Entire cities, proud for centuries, were reduced to black scars across the earth. Governments screamed into voided channels, demanding retaliation, desperate to coordinate, but every frequency was jammed, every satellite blinded. Humanity fought with rifles while their enemies wielded suns. On screens it looked hopeless. Soldiers ran through rubble, carrying wounded in arms slick with blood. Artillery fire lit up the night only to bounce harmlessly off alien shields. Drones buzzed overhead, dropping explosives that crushed entire battalions in a heartbeat. Everywhere the same message appeared, glowing in alien symbols that translated across every device. "Submit, and you will be spared." But humanity did not submit. In the smoking ruins of Warsaw, a young soldier dragged her comrade from the debris of a collapsed overpass. She looked up at the massive ship above, her eyes blazing not with despair but defiance. "Keep shooting," she hissed, shoving a rifle into his bloody hands. "We hold the line." Across the world, soldiers echoed her defiance. They fired, rifles at enemies who barely noticed, launched missiles at ships that shrugged off the blasts, and dug trenches in streets where plasma craters glowed red hot. It looked suicidal. It was suicidal, but their retreats were not panicked. Their defense, though desperate, was not without purpose. Something was strange. Alien commanders, watching from orbit, noted the patterns. Humans fought with determination, but their movements were calculated, controlled. Their retreats were too precise, their sacrifices too deliberate. This was not the chaos of a dying species, it was choreography. Still, the aliens dismissed it as futile. What threat could such primitive creatures pose? They pressed harder. In Cairo, an alien walker towered above the pyramids, its cannons charging for a blast to erase them. From the desert sands, a cluster of armored vehicles opened fire, knowing their shells would barely scratch the surface. Plasma rained down, annihilating them in a burst of fire and dust. But the vehicles had not fired. In vain. Their last shots weren't aimed at the walker's armor. They were aimed at its joints. The massive machine collapsed, its cannons tilting away from the pyramids at the last second, the blast cutting harmlessly into the desert night. 1,000 miles away in Berlin, a platoon deliberately lured alien drones into narrow streets. When the drones descended, soldiers detonated charges rigged to skyscrapers, crushing the machines beneath collapsing towers. Hundreds of lives lost, but the drones destroyed. Everywhere, across every battlefield, humanity fought as though their weakness was a weapon. Inside Earth's bunkers, commanders watched the battles unfold on massive screens. The world saw despair. The aliens saw futility, but the commanders saw something else: timing. Every move, every sacrifice, every burning city. It was part of a pattern. They were waiting. One general leaned forward, his eyes locked on the map of red alien markers spreading across the globe. He spoke softly, almost to himself. They think they're winning. Another officer glanced at him. Aren't they, sir? The general's lips curved into something colder than a smile. No. They've already lost. They just don't know it yet. Visual shift. Orbit. From the bridge of the alien flagship, commanders watched with mounting confusion. Victory was within reach, yet unease spread. Human resistance was irrational, their defiance illogical. A species so primitive should have surrendered already. One alien strategist tilted his head, his voice sharp. Why do they not kneel? No one answered. On Earth, amid fire and ruin, humanity's soldiers kept fighting. Their weapons broke, their cities burned, their skies collapsed into flame. But behind every desperate defense, behind every ruined street, there was the same quiet truth moving unseen among them. This was not the end. This was the opening act. For days, Earth burned, cities crumbled, nations bled. Humanity fought, bled, died, but never surrendered. On the surface, it looked like the end of history. The alien fleets hung in orbit like gods watching ants scatter. Their war machines carved scars across continents. And yet, deep beneath the Rockies, behind walls of steel and secrets, a different war was about to begin. Visual shift. NORAD Bunker, Colorado. The mountain groaned as tremors shook its foundations, dust falling from ancient concrete. Generals and scientists stood shoulder to shoulder in a cavern carved wider than a cathedral. Monitors glowed, displaying red zones across every continent. Casualty numbers climbed by the thousands, but their eyes weren't on the maps, they were on the doors. 200 feet tall, forged from titanium alloys never meant for daylight, the doors had not opened in decades. Behind them, something slumbered. Something built not for show, not for politics, not even for hope. It had been built for this. Are we green? A general asked, his voice hoarse but steady. A scientist, hands trembling over the console, nodded. Systems nominal. They're ready. The general closed his eyes. He remembered the early years, decades ago, when whispers of alien signals first reached Earth. How governments had argued, denied, ridiculed, and yet in the shadows they had prepared. Quietly, methodically, together. The alien fleets thought they were Earth's first visitors. They weren't. Humanity had learned before, adapted before, rebuilt from scraps and ruins, and hidden its knowledge like a knife beneath the table. The general opened his eyes. Do it. The scientist pressed the code sequence. Sirens wailed. Hydraulics groaned. Dust rained from the ceiling as the massive doors began to split. The cavern beyond stirred to life. Visual, the hangar awakens. Lights flared in a vast chamber that stretched into darkness, rows upon rows of machines waiting like slumbering titans. They weren't like human jets or tanks. Their angles bent the light unnaturally, surfaces absorbing shadows. Their engines hummed with a sound deeper than thunder, an echo felt more in the bones than in the ears. They were not alien, not human, something in between, the offspring of both genius and desperation, reverse-engineered from fragments of crash sites the public never knew about, designed by engineers who vanished into black projects, forged in silence beneath the mountains, waiting for the day Earth's skies would burn. That day had come. One by one, the craft roared awake, their hulls rippling with energy fields. Engineers in hardened suits sprinted across gantries, unplugging conduits, releasing locks. Pilots strapped into cockpits that felt alive, every surface humming with forbidden power. Launch sequence in motion. The scientist whispered, his voice drowned by the rising howl of engines. Above ground, the war raged on. Alien walkers marched through Chicago, their cannons leveling block after block. Drones swarmed highways where convoys of refugees fled south. Plasma beams split the air above the Thames, turning London's bridges into rivers of fire. But then, the ground shook not from alien fire but from below. In the Rockies, the mountain itself seemed to split. Massive steel shutters groaned open, and from the darkness beneath the earth, the first of the hidden craft rose. Dark, angular, silent. They broke the surface like predators breaching the sea. Alien scanners caught the movement instantly. Fleet. Commanders in orbit turned their attention to the anomaly. Their sensors painted the new craft, analyzing its shape, its composition. Primitive, they thought. Inferior. But then the ships disappeared. Not destroyed, not cloaked. Just gone. The aliens scrambled, confused. Their systems recalibrated, searching. Frequencies. They caught glimpses of movement, shadows darting where no ship should be. Then the first alien destroyer split in half. Visual. The first kill. It happened without warning. A vessel above New York suddenly imploded, its shields collapsing like glass, its hull folding inward as if crushed by an invisible hand. The explosion lit the skyline in a burning halo, the wreckage crashing into the river below. The aliens reeled. Humans on the streets froze, staring at the impossible sight. Their enemy, untouchable, invincible, had just fallen. On a comm channel, the general's voice crackled through to the pilots. "Confirm kill?" A calm reply answered. "Target eliminated." The general smiled grimly. "Good. Let them know we're awake." Visual shift. Alien command bridge. The alien admiral rose from his throne, his glowing eyes narrowing at the feed. This species was not supposed to have this technology, he hissed. His officers exchanged uneasy looks, their confidence fracturing. The admiral's voice dropped to a snarl. "Find it. Destroy it. Now." But the seeds of doubt had already been planted. Back on Earth, survivors pointed at the sky, their tears mixing with soot and ash. For the first time since the invasion began, hope burned brighter than fire. They whispered to one another, passing the words through ruined streets, through battered outposts, through crackling radios still alive in the chaos. "We can fight back." The invasion had been a storm, relentless, merciless, absolute. But storms end when something greater collides with them. And on the fourth night of Earth's burning, humanity finally revealed its thunder. Over New York, alien warships loomed above, the skyline, their shadows turning glass towers into monuments of despair. A carrier descended lower, plasma cannons humming as it prepared to erase what remained of Manhattan. Refugees huddled in subway tunnels, whispering prayers that no longer had meaning. The carrier's cannons flared, then went dark. No explosion, no impact, just silence. The massive ship trembled, its hull groaning like steel under a hammer. Then, without warning, it folded inward. Entire decks crushed flat as if squeezed by an invisible vice. The vessel collapsed in on itself before erupting into a blossom of fire. Shards of alien alloy rained into the Hudson, steam hissing skyward as water swallowed the wreckage. The people in the tunnels didn't understand what had happened. Not yet. But above them, a small girl pressed her face to the subway grating and gasped, "Mom! Look, they're falling!" Over Tokyo, 2 alien destroyers hovered over Shinjuku, their beams carving scars through skyscrapers. Suddenly, streaks of light slashed through the night sky. They weren't missiles, not jets. Too fast, too sharp. The streaks bent mid-air, vanishing and reappearing like shadows dancing between dimensions. A second later, both destroyers detonated from within. Explosions lit the skyline, fire rolling over neon signs and glass towers. Survivors who had expected death stood frozen, watching their executioners burn. "Impossible," an alien officer whispered aboard the fleet's flagship, his voice shaking. "Their craft bypassed our shields." Inside the Rockies command center, cheers erupted as feeds lit up with burning alien wreckage. Officers pounded their fists against tables, tears streaming from faces hardened by weeks of despair. Strike teams confirm, multiple kills across the grid. But the general didn't celebrate. He stood tall, watching the map as red markers blinked out. His voice was calm, cold. "Don't get comfortable. This is only the beginning. The galaxy will know we're awake. Behind him, pilots in experimental cockpits exchanged grim nods. They weren't flying aircraft. They were guiding predators, machines built to hunt what once hunted humanity. Over the Atlantic, a colossal alien dreadnought drifted above the ocean, its bulk casting a shadow over waves like a second nightfall. It had already destroyed 3 carrier groups, the wreckage smoldering beneath the waves. But then the sea itself erupted. From beneath the surface, a spear of light shot upward, piercing the dreadnought's belly. A thunderous explosion ripped across the horizon as water vaporized into steam towers miles high. The dreadnought split apart, burning wreckage raining down into the sea. Hidden undersea platforms, kept secret for decades, had joined the fight. Humanity had not only prepared for war in the skies but beneath the oceans. Alien fleet bridge, panic setting. The alien admiral rose, his claws curling into fists. Shields should be impenetrable. How do they? They are not impenetrable, one of his lieutenants interrupted, voice quaking. They are irrelevant. Their weapons bypass them entirely. The admiral slammed a hand against the console. No primitive species could do this. But even as he raged, another red blip vanished from the holographic map. Then another, and another. For the first time since the invasion began, silence filled the alien bridge. Not triumph, not certainty. Silence born of fear. Streets of London. A battered squad of human soldiers crouched behind rubble, their rifles useless against the hovering ship above. They had minutes left to live. Then, a shadow passed overhead, not alien, human. The new craft appeared like a phantom, black, angular, silent. It unleashed a single burst of energy that cut the alien vessel in two. Flames roared across the sky as wreckage crashed into the Thames. The soldiers stared, mouths open, as one whispered the impossible truth. That was ours. Around the world, similar whispers spread like wildfire. Survivors, soldiers, refugees, all saw the same thing. Alien. Giants brought low. Ships once thought invincible burning in the atmosphere. Hope, long dead, began to rise. Inside the bunker, the general's words. He leaned over the comms, his voice reaching every surviving unit, every desperate outpost still holding the line. This is not the end of humanity. This is the beginning of their end. Fight, hold, endure. We have bled for this moment. Now, they bleed for us. The words echoed across ruined battlefields. Soldiers gripped their rifles tighter. Civilians rose from hiding, defiance burning in their eyes. The galaxy thought Earth would break. Instead, Earth had just shown its teeth. The alien fleet staggered. One by one, their ships fell, shields collapsing beneath Earth's impossible counterattacks. Cities that had burned now echoed with cheers as survivors glimpsed hope in the night sky. But deep inside Earth's command bunkers, the generals were not celebrating. Because the machines were only half the plan, humanity's true weapon had not yet been unleashed. Visual, bunker briefing room. The general stood before a room of officers, his face carved from stone. Behind him, a hologram rotated slowly. The double helix of DNA. The screen zoomed in, revealing strands annotated with alien physiology data. This isn't just a war of steel, he said. It's a war of biology. And biology is where Earth is undefeated. A murmur rippled through the room. Everyone knew what he meant. Everyone feared it. Earth wasn't just dangerous because of its people. It was dangerous because of what it carried. Flashback, the first encounters. Decades ago, when Earth intercepted alien signals for the first time, there had been a quiet realization. Any species stepping foot on this world risked exposure. Earth was not a kind planet. Bacteria thrived in boiling sulfur pits. Viruses lurked in every breath of air. Fungi consumed flesh, bone, even stone. Humanity had survived it by evolving teeth, claws, and most of all, resilience. Aliens had no such defense. The galaxy hadn't quarantined Earth out of respect. They had quarantined it out of fear. Visual. Deployment. In sterile laboratories, buried beneath the Rockies, scientists in hazmat suits carried canisters marked only with a red sigil, Omega Protocol. Inside them swirled an ancient killer, something dormant, unearthed from glaciers older than civilization itself. Harmless to humans, lethal to the invaders. Drone swarms, stealth craft, and disguised warheads were armed not with explosives, but with payloads. When detonated, they would not burn cities, they would breathe life into Earth's most merciless assassins. The general's order came cold, sharp, final. Release it. Visual. Cairo. An alien walker stood among ruins, its cannons charging for another barrage. A black drone swept overhead unnoticed. It released a burst that glittered in the sunlight like golden dust. At first, nothing happened. Soldiers laughed in their guttural tongue, their weapons ready to fire. Then the first one stumbled. Another dropped his cannon, choking. Their armored suits hissed, filters failing. Within minutes, the squad collapsed, writhing, gasping, eyes wide with terror. The walker's cannons powered down. Its crew was dead inside, and the city fell silent. Visual. Sao Paulo. Alien troops advanced through a favela, their boots crushing concrete. Above them, human guerrillas retreated, their rifles useless. Then, tiny canisters rolled down the steps. They cracked open with a hiss. The aliens laughed. Primitive gas weapons couldn't pierce their suits. But then the suits began to melt. Filters corroded. Seals ruptured. And with every breath, the invaders inhaled Earth itself. Within moments, the street was filled not with gunfire, but with alien screams. Alien flagship bridge. Panic swept through the command decks. Reports flooded in. Troops collapsing. Ships, unmanned, crews dying with no wounds visible. "They've unleashed a bioweapon," one officer cried, his claws trembling over the console. The admiral snarled. "Countermeasures. Activate filtration systems." But even as he spoke, another officer coughed, his skin blistered. His voice broke into a gurgle before he collapsed on the deck, convulsing. The admiral recoiled, his eyes wide. For the first time in centuries, he knew the taste of fear. This world is cursed. Visual. Earth's survivors watching on. The streets of London, refugees peeked from the rubble as alien patrols suddenly staggered, fell, and did not rise again. In the forests of Canada, hidden soldiers tracked drones as they sprayed invisible mist across advancing columns of alien armor, only for the machines to stop moving minutes later, their crews dead within. Across the globe, a whisper spread faster than any transmission. They're dying. Shift. Humanity's reflection. Inside the bunker, silence weighed heavy. The generals knew what they had unleashed. Not everyone was proud. A scientist removed his glasses, his voice breaking. "Do we become monsters to kill monsters?" General's answer was cold, unwavering. "We survive. That is all that matters. History will judge us, but only if we win." Visual. Alien fleet. Disintegrating. In orbit, command channels filled with chaos. Fleets once united fractured into madness as ships turned inward, quarantining themselves, sealing airlocks, abandoning ground troops. But it was too late. The invisible killer had already spread. Entire armadas went silent. Ships drifted dead, their crews slumped at controls. The once invincible fleet became tombs in the void. On Earth, survivors emerged from hiding. For the first time, humanity looked up and saw not invincible gods, but carcasses falling from the sky. The skies above Earth were no longer theirs. Where once the alien armadas had hovered in triumph, now they drifted in chaos. Ships flickered with failing lights, engines sputtered. Entire squadrons went dark as crews collapsed at their stations, choking on air that had become their executioner. And below, Earth struck. Visual. Orbital mines. Near the curve of the Pacific, a lone alien cruiser limped through orbit, its shields weakening. It never saw the trap. A dormant satellite blinked awake, its panels unfolding like the petals of a steel flower. From its core, a tungsten rod launched downward at Mach 25. The rod hit the cruiser with the force of a small nuke. No explosion, just impact. The ship folded, crumpling into debris that spiraled in flames through the atmosphere, streaking across the night like a falling star. And it was not alone. Around the globe, humanity's dead satellites stirred. For decades, they had orbited in silence, dismissed as relics. In truth, they had been armed, hidden among thousands of civilian satellites. Now they came alive, launching rods, detonating charges, tearing holes in the enemy fleets. Visual. Railgun satellites, above Africa, railgun platforms hidden among orbital junk opened fire. Massive slugs of metal streaked through vacuum, tearing through destroyers as if they were paper. Alien shields designed to deflect energy weapons were useless against pure kinetic wrath. Each shot split ships into molten fragments. Fire rained through the stratosphere, burning trails across the horizon. To the terrified civilians below, it looked as if the stars themselves were falling. Alien Command Bridge. The breaking point. The admiral clutched the railing of his flagship, his glowing eyes darting between collapsing fleets. Contain the spread. Seal the ships, he roared. But his crew hesitated. Fear hollowed their eyes. Too many had already fallen sick. Too many stations sat unmanned. Admiral, a trembling officer whispered, our enemy is not just fighting us. The planet itself fights us. The admiral bared his fangs. We are not prey. But even as he spoke, a warning klaxon screamed. A railgun slug pierced the flagship's flank, rocking the massive vessel with violent tremors. Entire decks decompressed, alien crewmen sucked into the void. For the first time, the invincible flagship trembled. Visual. Above Earth's atmosphere, alien formations broke apart in panic. Battleships once perfectly aligned scattered, colliding with each other as retreat orders clashed with conflicting quarantine protocols. Some fired blindly, striking their own vessels in desperation. One cruiser, engines flaring at full burn, tried to flee into deep space. It didn't make it. Humanity's hidden orbital mines detonated in sequence, surrounding the fleeing vessel in blossoms of nuclear fire. The ship disintegrated into glittering shards, scattering into the abyss. Visual. Earth responds. From underground hangars, more of humanity's impossible craft rose into the heavens. Sleek and silent, they weaved between hulking alien giants, slicing them apart with beams that bypassed shields entirely. Above Brazil, 3 such craft circled a dreadnought, cutting into it like predators harrying prey. Each strike crippled its systems until at last the ship sagged, burning, and fell into the ocean below with a roar that shook the earth for miles. Survivors along the coast watched, wide-eyed, as the sea swallowed their would-be conquerors, and they cheered. Alien fleet broadcast. Desperation. Across the collapsing network, a captain transmitted one final order. Withdraw. Abandon the planet. Leave this cursed world before we are. All static swallowed his voice. His ship exploded moments later. Visual. The sky falls. All over Earth, the night turned into a storm of fire. Alien wreckage rained through the atmosphere, breaking apart in streaks of flame. Chunks of molten hulls slammed into oceans, forests, and deserts. In the ruins of Paris, a boy pointed upward at the burning streaks. Look, Mama. The stars are falling. But his mother knew better. They weren't stars. They were the invaders. Alien. Flagship. Last transmission. The admiral stood alone on his bridge, lights flickering around him. His officers were dead or dying, his fleet shattered. He gazed down at Earth, the blue world gleaming through the smoke and fire. He activated the emergency channel, the one that reached beyond their empire, into the galactic network. His voice was hoarse, trembling, stripped of arrogance. We were warned. The humans remember. The signal broadcasted across the stars, a beacon of defeat carried faster than light, and then the flagship split in half. Visual. Earth below. On the ground, The thunder of wreckage falling blended with the roar of survivors rising from bunkers and rubble. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity saw the sky not as a prison, but as a victory. The fires still burned when the message began. Across the shattered earth, survivors crawled from bunkers, cellars, and ruined subways. Smoke painted the horizon black. Cities were ruins. Millions were gone. Yet humanity was still standing, and, above them, the last alien wreckage burned through the sky, a rain of steel and flame that marked the invaders' funeral pyre. But the generals knew victory on Earth was not enough. The galaxy had to hear, visual, Command Bunker, Colorado Rockies. Deep beneath the mountains, generators hummed and screens glowed with the debris of shattered fleets. Engineers moved with urgency, cables snaking across the floor. At the center, a single chair faced a microphone. The general sat down, his uniform torn, his face weathered by sleepless nights. He cleared his throat, leaned in, and pressed the transmitter. His voice was carried not by local relays, not by human satellites, but by hijacking the dying alien networks. Every channel the invaders had opened became Earth's voice. The generals. Address broadcast to the galaxy. This is Earth. You came here believing we were prey. You thought us weak, fractured, unworthy of the stars. You were wrong. His words echoed across worlds light years away, translated automatically by the invaders' own systems. Billions of beings across the galaxy froze, listening to a voice no one had expected to ever hear. We did not seek this war, but you brought it to our soil, to our skies, to our children, and you learned what others forgot. Earth does not forgive invaders. Earth devours them. Visual. The galaxy listens. In distant marketplaces, alien merchants dropped their wares as human words blared from communication towers. In military academies across star systems, cadets fell silent, watching Earth's burning sky projected onto their walls. Some scoffed, some trembled. Others remembered ancient whispers, the warnings etched into forgotten records. Back on Earth, the broadcast continues. The general leaned closer, his voice iron. Your fleets rot in our skies. Your soldiers feed the soil. Your weapons are dust. And your empire is broken. He paused. Around him, the bunker was silent except for the hum of machinery. The world held its breath. Then he delivered the warning. Let this be known across the stars. Earth is not to be touched, not to be taken, not to be tested. We are not prey. We are the storm that ends empires. Visual. Alien survivors on Earth. The few aliens who remained alive were rounded up in cages of steel and silence. Some wept, others stared in horror, their arrogance shattered. Through their own devices, they too heard the broadcast. A young human soldier glanced at one of them through the bars and whispered, "We told you not to come." Visual. The ruins of New York. In the shadow of toppled skyscrapers, civilians huddled around emergency radios, hearing their general's voice cut through static. For the first time in weeks, people raised their heads in pride. Some wept openly. Some clenched their fists. It wasn't just a warning. It was a vow. The broadcast's final words. The general's voice dropped lower, quieter but more dangerous than any shout. We do not seek conquest. We do not seek revenge. But should you come again, know this. Earth remembers. Earth waits. And Earth survives. The transmission ended. Visual. The galaxy reacts. On distant worlds, silence followed the broadcast. Armies froze mid-drill. Council chambers erupted into chaos. Merchants whispered of a curse older than memory. And somewhere, in the dark, species that had long avoided Earth nodded grimly. The humans had reminded the galaxy of why the quarantine once existed. Earth had been left alone not by chance, but by fear. Now that fear was awake again. Back on Earth, survivors' reflection. The general removed his headset. His shoulders sagged. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, a soldier asked, "Sir, What if they don't listen? The general's eyes, tired but burning with steel, looked up at the map of fallen ships above the earth. Then they'll learn the same way these invaders did. The war was over, but the silence that followed was louder than the gunfire, louder than the crashing of alien warships into the seas, louder than the thunder of orbital weapons raining from the sky. The world stood still. Visual, the ruins of London. In the broken streets of London, survivors climbed out of subway tunnels, blinking at the pale sunlight cutting through the smoke. Children pointed at the horizon where burning alien wreckage fell like comets. A father knelt among the ruins, clutching his son. He whispered, "We survived, boy. We survived." The words spread like wildfire across the planet. From the ashes of Paris, from the rubble of Shanghai, from the deserts where alien craft lay gutted, humanity whispered the same word: survived. Visual. Alien dead. Orbiting Earth. Above, the shattered alien fleet circled in silent orbit, their corpses entombed in glassy wreckage. A steel graveyard lit the night, glowing faintly like a crown of death around Earth. Astronomers once silenced by the blackout now looked up and saw it with awe and terror. A crown of ruin that told the galaxy a simple truth: those who touched Earth would be buried by it. Visual. The galactic councils react. Light years away, the galaxy was in uproar. Councils bickered. Fleets paused mid-drill. Empires long thought unstoppable quivered in their seats. A trembling diplomat replayed Earth's broadcast for the 100th time. The words echoed in the chamber like thunder. We are not prey. We are the storm that ends empires. Some wanted to test humanity again. Others, wiser, shook their heads. The ancient fear was back, the one spoken in half-whispered myths, and as the memory of Earth's defiance spread, species across the stars remembered why the map of the galaxy had always stopped short of human space. Back on Earth, a funeral, and a vow. In the smoking ruins of Washington, soldiers gathered to bury the fallen. Flags, torn and ash-stained, were raised again. Survivors stood in silence as names were read, the list so long it seemed endless. And yet, for every tear shed, there was a spark of fire in their eyes. Humanity had paid dearly, but the price was not in vain. The general, standing before the graves, spoke softly. They thought they ended us. Instead, they awakened us. And now the stars will remember. Visual. Humanity rebuilds. Across the world, bunkers opened. Emergency factories roared to life. Crippled power grids sparked back. Farmers returned to blackened soil, planting seeds amid the craters. Engineers salvaged alien wreckage, their eyes gleaming at the technology left behind. What was meant to break humanity instead armed them for the future. The invaders had given Earth not just a war, but a foundation for something greater. Alien. Survivor's perspective. A handful of captured aliens caged in reinforced compounds stared at the humans who guarded them. Their once proud eyes were now hollow. One whispered to another, "They should not have survived." The other only shook his head. No, they were never meant to be prey. Visual. The stars. Themselves. From the mountains of Chile to the deserts of Arizona, telescopes turned upward once more. Survivors, scientists, children, soldiers, gazed at the night sky. But this time, they did not see endless darkness filled with predators. They saw possibility. "Do you think they'll come back?" a child asked her mother, pointing at the glittering expanse. Her mother's voice was steady. "If they do, they'll remember what happened here, and so will we." Closing sequence. The warning. On the edge of the solar system, the wreckage of fleeing alien craft still transmitted faint signals. Those signals carried Earth's broadcast farther and farther into the void. Every passing day, more species would hear it. More empires would shudder. More predators would pause before daring to step foot on the blue world. For Earth had spoken, and the stars had listened. Final moral. They invaded Earth, and the war ended before it began. Not because of weapons alone. Not because of numbers, but because humanity remembered who they were, survivors, fighters, and storms incarnate. And from that day forward, the galaxy did not look at Earth as prey. They looked at Earth as a warning.